So back when I was like 24, 25 years old and I started in financial services, I had this investment background, right? And I thought I knew a lot about finances, just in general. Get my CFA charter, all that type of stuff. And by all recognition, by outside individuals, they would say, yeah, you are a financial expert because you have these things. But yet internally, I felt lost. Like things that I was doing weren't working, and things that I was told and taught to do, I realized weren't working, because when I sat down with clients in their 50s and 60s and seeing how they were missing goals and how their financial lives weren't panning out and they had done these things, it's like something's missing. And it took me a long time to realize it, like not overnight. So when I mean long time, it took me probably about 5 or 6 months to really say, okay, I want to really look at this and reflect on myself and take all these things that I know about finance and say, hey, what's going on here? But it wasn't necessarily finance by itself, okay? It was psychology and behavior that I really started looking at. And where this came into play was that when I was in sports, we worked with sports psychologists. And if I had not ever gone into finance, one of the things I wanted to do when I was growing up was be an FBI profiler. So I had been reading about behavioral traits and all this type of stuff. And I started looking at both of those things combined, psychology, behavior, and money, and what I knew, okay? Now, this led me to the realization of where people get this wrong. You see, most of us when we think of financial freedom, we think of tangible dollars and cents, okay? Well, there's an intangible portion. We call this the mental side, how we think about money, okay? And I realized that you cannot have tangible financial freedom unless you have intangible financial freedom first, meaning you're thinking about money correctly. And so that's when I decided this is gonna be my mission. I'm gonna set out to help people with both, okay? And I'll give you an example of what I actually mean by this. And those of you that have been in our workshops and webinars and stuff, or listened to this podcast, you may have heard this example, but I'm gonna use it again. I have an uncle, for example, that's frugal as hell. I mean, he's worth like $4 million, worth a ton, like can live, retire, be fine, but stressed out of his mind about money. No matter how much he has, he's stressed about it. He's had like 3 heart surgeries. I mean, he's probably not gonna live to 75 years old. Like he's just destroyed. That's not financial freedom. You're still a slave to money at that point, okay? So when I set out to on this mission, I said, look, I want to do both, tangible and intangible. So like the AI and the tech we built at FitBUX, that is the tangible portion, right? To help decrease the stress, make financial planning accessible to people, and implement some of the things that we talk about on the podcast, right? The financial planning method that we have is a blend of both tangible and intangible. So like the dividing it up into 3 groups: day-to-day money, money for future self, risk management. Number 1 goal, increase how much money's doing to money for future self. Second goal, for short term, focus on one thing at a time. That's a blend of both tangible and intangible, okay? The intangible portion, this podcast, the YouTube videos, the money school course, the financial mindset workshops, some of the future tech that we've been discussing building, okay? That's where you have to get into, tangible and intangible. And in this podcast and in this video, I am going to give you an example of a FitBUX member and how when he changed the way he thinks about money, just the amount of stress that he's like, oh my God, like I am completely stress-free about having to make this decision now. He achieved intangible financial freedom, and now he's on an easy path to achieving financial freedom. So I'm going to share you with that story today, so that way you can learn from this and take this and use it for yourself. Now, before we dive into it and go through his story and background, if you're watching on YouTube, welcome. If it's your first time, hello. I'm Joseph Reinke, founder of FitBUX. Thank you for joining us. Same thing if you're the first time on the podcast listening. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button, notification bell. Make sure you get new episodes that come out. It also helps us grow, which allows us to, continue on our mission of helping as many people as we can. Same thing with the podcast. If you're listening to the podcast, make sure you subscribe so that way you're notified when new content comes out. It's appreciated. Thank you in advance, and let's dive into this. Okay, now I call it like old, quote unquote, old world parents. I don't like saying that term. That's what society uses. But that's what this individual had. He had an Asian family that was very old school, paying off debt, that type of stuff. I mean, it's not just an Asian thing. I see it with, my parents were, similar, all that type of stuff. So that's why I hate saying where it's like old school or an Asian family or whatnot. But that's what his background. He came from a very traditional Asian family that was like no debt, no debt, no debt. Okay. So in his situation, this was his dilemma, is that he had a $300,000 mortgage. That was the only debt that he had. And the interest rate on it is at 2.7%. And his monthly payment is about $1,800 a month. And him and his spouse make a little bit over $300,000 a year. No other debt. So financially, they're perfectly fine. They're not, in any problem. And he called me up one day. And I mean, it reminded me of when I was like 24 or 25, like I was telling you about earlier, like when I was like, I know these different things and I'm still like stressed because I've been putting it together. He wasn't thinking about the intangible portion of things, right? And he was just stressed saying, look, I'm getting this pressure from my family to just pay off my mortgage. And I'm nowhere near being a financial expert, but I do know enough to know that 2.7% is a really low rate. Should I not be paying it off? I mean, in his case, he even said this to me, like, I have money in the bank and it's earning 4.5%. Like, just, you don't have to be a mathematical genius or a financial expert to understand that 4.5% I'm making, this thing's only costing me 2.7%. Well, if I just save it, I get to keep that difference, right? And so he was having so much problems. Like every month when he would go to pay his mortgage bill, some months he would make a prepayment, other months he would talk himself out of it. And he's like, look, like at least once a month, like I'm sitting here for like an hour or two stressing about this. And then even after I do make the payment or save it, I'm still stressing about it. Okay. And I said, okay, this is how we can mentally think about this. So that way you can start dropping that stress level and how you think about money. Okay. Now, as I said, our financial plan building method, our FitBUX financial plan building method breaks your budget into 3 categories. So that way it's very easy to organize things. Okay. It's day-to-day money, money for future self, and risk management. We're going to focus on money for future self. Okay. When we build out a plan, we put money in each one of those categories. And then when it comes to money for future self, we first start with minimums. So like a minimum to get your match, a minimum to a Roth, and minimum debt payments. And after you put in your day-to-day expenses and after you have your risk management, there's a number that you get at the very end. It's called available funds. That's how much money you have left over after you do your day-to-day expenses, insurance, and you put the minimums towards savings and your debt. Okay, that money is what you have to go to your number one short-term goal. Okay, and so in his case, he was like, well, I could do $2,500 a month extra. I have to decide if I put that towards the paying off my mortgage faster or if I put that towards savings. And I asked him, I said, well, what stresses you out? He's like, just having this dollar amount like that I owe above my head. And I said, okay, let's think about this. Okay, from a dollars and cents standpoint, it makes sense to put the money in the bank, earn interest on it, and slowly pay off your student loans. He's like, yes, but I still got this thing in the back of my head. I said, okay, well, we got to flip this mentally. Okay, what happens if you open up an account at the bank and you literally call it like, I won't say his name on the podcast because we're not allowed to from a compliance standpoint. But I said, what if you name it XYZ, your name, like mortgage, and just that's what it is. And every month you put the $2,500 in that instead of putting it towards your mortgage. But you're mentally telling yourself, this is going towards my mortgage payment. And then what happens is instead of looking at the balance that you owe, so like if you owe $300,000 right now, you don't look at $300,000. Okay? You look at $300,000 minus whatever is in that savings account. And that net number is the balance that you actually owe. And so I'll give you an example. Let's just say, a year goes by and his mortgage is right around 300 grand still, but he's got $25,000 or close to $30,000 saved in this account. Well, instead of saying I still owe $300,000, take $300,000, subtract out the $30,000 that's in the savings account, and you only have $270 left in the mortgage. So from a mental standpoint, you're tricking yourself because you're saying, like, what you're really saying, in this case, what he was saying is, I want my balance to go to zero. Okay. Well, by doing this, you're tricking your brain to see that number going down to zero. And what will eventually end up happening, say in 5 years, he might have about $190, say $200,000 saved in the savings account, but he might only owe $200,000 on the loan. So anytime he wants to, he can take the money out of the account, pay off the mortgage if he wants to, no more stress. And not only that, but then let's just say he now has $225 in savings, but he only owes, say, $190 on the mortgage. Now he can take the extra $35,000 and go and invest it into whatever he wants to and be more aggressive with it because he's still got his overall mortgage balance. Again, if he wanted to, he can write a check and pay it off. That's a lot less stress. So what he's doing is just looking at a different number rather than saying, hey, this is the balance that I owe. That's very stressful, seeing that big, big number. But if I can see it dropping, fantastic. And that's what he's doing. And then same thing. What happens if rates go down? So all of a sudden his savings rate goes from 4.5% down to 1%. Take the money. Let's just say it happens that he has 70 grand at that point saved. Take the 70 grand, make a big prepayment on your mortgage and get it down. It's basically making your life a lot less stressful because he's seen that balance go down. Now, the reason why this is really important to each one of you is a lot of you listening to this podcast and watching on YouTube have income-driven repayment plans. And it's the same type of thing that we see with those, okay? A lot of individuals on income-driven repayment plans are like, man, I owe a balance of 150 grand. And even though I know that I'm not going to have to pay that because my loans are forgiven, that balance never goes down and it stresses me out. Don't think about it that way. You don't owe $150,000. That's not your debt. You owe your monthly payment, and on income-driven repayment plans, you're going to owe the tax at the end of it. So if that tax, for example, is, let's say, $60,000, that $60,000 is the debt that you owe, not the $150,000 that your balance is. So when you think about it like that 60, first of all, it's a lower number, so that's going to help you lower your stress. But then you do the same thing. You start saving for the IDR tax bomb. Like at FitBUX, we call it saving at least the required minimum amount to save for that, right? And so let's just say you start off at $60,000, but you've saved $10,000 into a specialized fund, let it be the Roth IRA like we recommend, or an outside taxable savings investment account, whatever it is. But you owe $60,000 in estimated taxes and you've saved $10,000. Well, you net that out. Your debt's actually only $50,000. And then maybe next year, maybe instead of $10,000 saved, you now got $20,000 saved. So now the debt that you owe is $40,000. So from a financial mindset perspective, it's not that your $150,000 balance isn't going down. The tax balance that you're owing is going down because you're netting it out with how much you've had saved. And so mentally, what you really want to see, what most of you say, like the example I gave you with my buddy that's a FitBUX member with his mortgage, and what I've seen with income-driven repayment plans is people feel stressed because it's a big number and they don't see it going down over time. By tricking yourself with these savings accounts and netting it out, you will see that balance going down over time. And as we've implemented this with FitBUX members, like I said, we've helped, I think, close to 20,000 people now. I want to say something like 12,000 of those are on income-driven repayment plans. The people that take that to heart and say, yeah, I'm going to think about it that way. The reports we get back from them are like, I'm so glad that you show me that the stress that I'm under is basically gone. Like, I don't even look at the balance on what I owe anymore. I just look at the tax, subtract out what I save, get that net number amount, and I feel good because I see it going down. Same thing with the FitBUX member I told you about with the mortgage. As soon as he started implementing that, it's been about 3 or 4 months now. He's like, this is awesome. Like, I already got $10,000 saved, and I'm just like, wow, I'm chipping away at this mortgage. So even though the mortgage balance on my statement says high, it's like I don't even care anymore. Like, this is awesome. And so that's why I wanted to jump on this podcast and this YouTube video, is because that trick, when you have debt, let it be like the mortgage debt with a low interest rate or saving for the tax bomb, it's a massive, massive trick. Like I said, make sure that you hit subscribe, either on the podcast or the YouTube video. If you're on YouTube and you want more tips and tricks like this, be sure to hit some of the videos that pop up. We appreciate you guys supporting the channel. We'll talk to you guys soon.